As I've said many, many times, and I never get tired of it, I'm Jim Ruane, the very proud mayor of the wonderful city of San Bruno, and I'd like to welcome you here this evening. First of all, thank you to the Church of the Highlands and Pastor Dave for their accommodation this evening and their hospitality. They've helped us a number of times before, not just at this facility, but they're always there when needed. So, Pastor Dave, thank you very much on behalf of the people of San Bruno. I'm joined here tonight by Vice Mayor Salazar, Ken Ibarra, council member, and Rico Medina, council member, and Irene O'Connell and Ken Ibarra. Let me see, I forgot myself. That's why I always miscount. But Ken Ibarra, Rico Medina, Michael Salazar. Irene O'Connell is representing us this evening in the South Bay in Palo Alto. Jerry Hill, our assembly person, is having a safety and regulation discussion this evening because of, obviously, people in that part of the county and the northern Santa Clara County are in fact very interested in our story, and hopefully it doesn't become their story. So they want to know about pipeline safety, what's being done, what we went through, and what's happening as far as regulations. This is a follow-up meeting to our July meeting when we introduced the initial plans for rebuilding of the infrastructure of the neighborhood. And since then, the City Council has received a report on the planning process, and we have confirmed the city's plan to take the necessary steps to complete the projects necessary not just to repair, but to rebuild and improve the damaged neighborhood. Harry Burrows, our project manager for Crestmore Neighborhood Infrastructure Rebuild, will provide a detailed overview of our plans tonight, and our staff is here to answer your questions and provide additional information. Following the presentation, we welcome your comments. There's some question sheets out there, and we'd like to use those comments to help us further prepare and refine our plans. We have committed to keeping you informed about our progress, and we will be scheduling additional meetings as the work to rebuild the neighborhood progresses. Just a reminder, this Saturday at the Senior Center from 2 till 4, we are going to have another get-together, strictly social. Good idea to come down, have a little coffee, cake, and some desserts and some of the goodies that the city will provide, just to get together once again to renew some old friendships. Some are still displaced, and hopefully not for too much longer. About 12 homes are underway. We see some ribbons getting ready to cut here pretty soon. More homes are in the planning process, and we're going to get back there. So working very hard to make that happen, and you're a part of it. Thank you very much. Harry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'm Harry Burrows, and I'm the city's project manager for the Glenview Neighborhood Reconstruction Project. I wanted to just take a moment again to welcome everybody and thank you all for being here this evening. Tonight's presentation, there's a lot of information that we are going to present, or that I'm going to present here, and as the mayor said, there's senior staff from the city here, as well as consultants that are working on the project, representatives from BKF engineers, as well as their subconsultant MIG, are here to help answer any questions that the public may have this evening. The format for the presentation tonight is, I'm going to bore you for about 20 or 25 minutes with a lot of information, and then, as the mayor said, afterwards open it up for questions. There are comment and question cards. You're welcome to fill those out. We also have 2 roving microphones that people will bring to you if you have questions that you don't have a chance to write down on the cards. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide the residents with an update on the extent and the timing of the rebuilding efforts. We are seeking input from the public and comment, and we are hopefully going to address most of your comments and concerns that you raised tonight. So in terms of the topics that we're going to cover tonight, again, want to update you on the status of the infrastructure design and the construction projects that have occurred in the neighborhood and ones that are pending. Want to talk about the phasing and the timing of future work in the neighborhood. Want to talk about the undergrounding of utilities, the potential to underground the dry utilities. And when I say dry utilities, that's an engineering term. I'm talking about the PG&E, Pac Bell, or AT&T, and cable TV lines that are currently on the poles in the neighborhood. Also want to talk briefly about the Crestmore Canyon replanting efforts. Talk about the Earl Glenview Park replacement. Talk about traffic issues in the neighborhood. I know that's been a concern of many of the residents. We'll also do a status of the efforts of the home rebuilding in the neighborhood, and then also want to introduce our new Rebuild Crestmore website. So in terms of a little bit of background, before I get into the projects, just wanted to reiterate something that the mayor said, which is late last year, the city council had a study session where staff presented recommendations for the infrastructure improvements in the neighborhood. And subsequent to that, the council had a city council meeting where they adopted a resolution that confirmed those improvements. And again, by confirming those improvements, the council reiterated their commitment that they are rebuilding the community and not just repairing the damage that occurred in the event. So let's take a look at some of the projects. I'm not sure which screen you guys are looking at, but I'll point over to this one here on my right, your left. So in October, we completed the what we called the surface restoration work, and that was the filling of the crater, the blast crater, and the repaving of the roadway at Glenview and Earl. And in addition to that, there was some what we called temporary safety improvements, fence around the canyon, as well as some sidewalk and curb and gutter repairs so that the neighborhood was safe for pedestrians to walk through. So again, that work was completed in October of last year. We recently completed, just at the end of the year in December, what we call our Phase 1 sewer replacement. It was a small project, replacing and upsizing a sewer line between two lots. The sewer line ran from the canyon over to Claremont Drive, and that project has been completed. This project up here in blue is what we call the Phase 1 water system improvements. And what that project consists of is some new water line upsizing and new water line connections to a water line that's in Sneath Lane. In addition to that, we'll be constructing two pressure regulating stations, one here and one here. And the main purpose of the project is to help blend water from the higher water pressure in that water line that's within Sneath down into this neighborhood to help provide more reliable water pressures and fire flows during peak demand periods. That project will be starting construction here in about hopefully 3 weeks. It'll be about a 2.5-month duration, so it'll be a February through the end of April construction period. I'll talk a little bit about this later in the presentation. The website that we are unrolling this evening will have information on there about these construction projects, so you will be able to go there and have updates on things like street closures or lane closures and that sort of information. These water lines will be within the roadway, so there will be some disruption within the upper portion of Earl at Sneath, within Sneath itself, and within both the upper and lower portions of Claremont. An additional project that was completed in the October-November timeframe was PG&E got into the fire damaged area of the neighborhood and replaced the gas distribution lines so that all of the homes and all of the lots now have their gas service restored. So then in terms of future phases of work, we're currently in final design of underground improvements within the fire damaged area. And it's a little bit difficult to see in this exhibit, but the area that's outlined here in with the white base is the approximate area of the improvements. What we're planning on doing with this project is going in and replacing the water lines, the sewer lines, the storm drain lines, and putting in some conduits for street lights. That project, we will not be repaving the roadway at this point in time. We'll be patching the asphalt. We'll come back with a later project when we do the remainder of the neighborhood and do the final lift of pavement. What we don't want to do is do the final lift now and have construction traffic and other traffic tear up that road on an interim basis. In terms of timing, again, we think we'll be out in construction in May, and that's probably going to be a May through August timeframe for construction. Then the next phase of work after that area will be the remaining neighborhood improvements. And the extent of the improvements that the council approved back in December was to replace the similar sort of utilities throughout the remainder of the neighborhood. So we're talking about upsizing and replacing the sewer lines to current standards, going in and upsizing and replacing the water lines to current standards. Most of the sewer lines in the neighborhood within the streets are 6-inch. We're going to upsize those to 8-inch. Same with the water lines. Where we have drainage issues, we will be constructing storm drain improvements. We'll also be going into certain areas where there are V-ditches or valley gutters that aren't connected properly to a storm drain, and we'll make sure that those are connected up as well as part of this project. One thing that's worth noting is, as we are all aware, PG&E's line 132 followed this alignment within Glenview and then up and across Sneath at that location through the neighborhood. At the last meeting that we had in July, we informed the public that PG&E planned to decommission that line by filling it with a slurry. We've been in recent discussions with PG&E, and we're talking with them about actually removing that line in its entirety so it will come out of the ground. So when we get to the comments, if you guys would like to comment on that, I think that's the comment. In terms of this remaining neighborhood improvements, a couple things, again, that we're looking for some feedback from the public on. We have the option of going in and doing all of this work at once, letting one big contract and essentially having the neighborhood, for lack of a better way of describing it, torn up to put in the new sewer lines and water lines throughout the entire neighborhood. The advantage of that is the total time frame we may be able to compress to get these improvements done. The disadvantage is the entire neighborhood or portions of the entire neighborhood will be disturbed under construction. The other option that we have is exploring maybe we just do one portion of the neighborhood, get in there, complete all the water, sewer, roadway work, while the remaining portion of the neighborhood stays untouched. When we finish this portion, we then move over to the other portion of the neighborhood and do those improvements. So it's sort of a trade-off. The duration of the overall project may be longer if we phase it, but the impacts might be minimized, or there might be routes that people can take to minimize the disruption of going through the neighborhood if we do it that way. Some of the individual details or elements of the second phase or the next phase of improvements include the enhanced streetscape and what we call traffic calming improvements. These diagrams, they're out in the hallway, and I noticed a lot of people were viewing them before the meeting, and they're a little bit hard to see here. The idea is that we have the opportunity, particularly on Glenview and portions of Claremont where the road is wide, to do some traffic calming measures. And by traffic calming, that's a technical term, but what it really means is traffic calming is putting measures in place that serve two purposes, both reduce the speed of traffic through a neighborhood as well as discourage cut-through traffic. So what we're looking at as potential options are from San Bruno Avenue all the way down to, or up to, heading north, up to Claremont, looking at doing what we call bulb outs. And what bulb outs are is we take the curb and we bring them into the street, and we have little pockets that we can landscape. And if you're driving down the road, it tends to narrow the roadway up, and by narrowing the roadway up, that's a known traffic calming measure, and it does have the effect of slowing traffic down. The other thing that we are looking at is in the intersections, we have two different options that we think are truly viable in terms of the intersections. And those are doing bulb outs at the intersections, which is, again, widening the intersections by flaring out the curb, narrowing them up. We're still going to have enough room for cars to travel both directions and for emergency vehicles and everything else to travel through the intersections. But again, it serves a purpose of narrowing that down, slowing traffic through the intersection. The other option is a combination of a slightly less wide flare out or bulb out at the intersections, and maybe integrating a traffic circle in the intersections. Both of these options have pros and cons from an engineering standpoint. I'm not going to go into that level of detail here this evening, but these are just some examples and some ideas that, again, we'd appreciate some feedback and comment from the public on, because it's your neighborhood and we'd like to know what you want to see there. Well, in terms of the question was, when do we want those comments? We would love to hear what you have to say tonight. We are rolling out this website. There's an avenue there for comments. You can put comments on the website, and we have an email address as well. So, any time over the next, the sooner the better is great from a schedule standpoint.
Have you ever walked on the sidewalks in San Bruno? There aren't many of them, but the ones that are there are so narrow that it's scary.
Okay. No, thank you. Here's some illustrations that show some of the examples. Again, what I was describing earlier, these represent some of the bulb outs as you would drive down Glenview. And then this would be a traffic circle. And that's actually at the intersection, shown at the intersection of Claremont and Glenview, looking south. This is the enhanced intersection at Earl and Glenview. And this is a potential entrance to the park, or a rebuilt park over there. So these are just some illustrations of what implementing these traffic calming measures could look like. The other thing that we'll be doing within the neighborhood is, at many of the intersections, there's storm drain facilities that are right in the middle of what we call the return. The return is this, the radius around the where the two streets meet. Having that storm drain inlet at that location doesn't allow us to integrate and construct current standard ADA, American with Disabilities Act ramps. So one of the goals of this project is to make all of the sidewalks ADA compatible. So we will be doing that with this project, and in some locations that will mean doing some storm drain revisions at those intersections as well. A couple remaining elements are the replacement of the Earl Glenview Park and the replanting of the canyon. In terms of the park, the former park that was there was a small pocket park. I think it had a small play structure in it. The city wants to include the public in shaping the vision of that replacement park. Unfortunately, the timing of that is really a function of several different things. I talked about the streetscape enhancements. We want to, integrate the park design with those streetscape enhancements. So we really need to figure out what we're doing with the streetscape before we get into a detailed discussion related to the park. Also, some of the infrastructure timing, and then there's some real estate issues as well. So this is something that's definitely on the radar screen, and we will be paying attention to quickly, but it's not something that we can really delve into at this point in time. And then in terms of the canyon replanting, Obviously, everyone is aware that after the explosion and fire, a lot of work was done within the canyon for erosion control and slope stability issues. We have been in discussions with several arborists as well as landscape architects and geotechnical engineers related to what makes the most sense to replant in the canyon, and they have come up with some recommendations. What they have recommended is that the planting palette be native species, what they call high chaparral or a coast planting palette. And I'm not a landscape architect, so they had to explain to me what that means. What that means is instead of eucalyptus trees and tall pine trees and other things like that, it's more plant materials like live oaks, manzanitas, some of the lower shrubs, that sort of plants. This is an illustration showing what the canyon looks like now and potentially what it would look like if you integrated those sort of plant materials in the canyon. What we're seeing here is these are sprouts coming out of the eucalyptus stumps that are there. And the recommendation that we have from our geotechnical engineer and the landscape architects is that we allow these sprouts to grow each year, and every spring we cut them down. What we want to do is until we come in with a new planting material, we want to make sure that those eucalyptus roots stay alive because they help hold that slope together. The theory is that once we replant the canyon, it's going to take 5 or 6 years for those new plants to establish. We'll continue to let these things sprout on an annual basis and cut them down until the point at which the new plants have established, and then we can go in and actually kill the eucalyptus trees at that point. So that's their recommendation as their recommended option. Another option is certainly to, this is just a illustration of the plant types that they're recommending as a preferred option. Those are the ones that I described earlier, the manzanitas and the shrubs and the live oak. Another option is certainly to let the canyon just resprout and regrow on its own. The downsides of that are eventually it will regrow to what it looked like before, or similar to what it looked like before, and obviously there are public safety concerns with that and fire concerns as well. So let's talk a little bit about the undergrounding of the overhead utilities, because I know there's been a lot of interest in that expressed by the residents. Just to couch the issue, some of the residents expressed an early interest when we started talking about the infrastructure reconstruction of the possibility of undergrounding the utilities within the neighborhood. So the city undertook a feasibility study that was focused on the logistics of doing that, as well as the cost of doing that. And that study was completed late last year, and we agreed to come back and present that to the public. So that's what we wanted to do here tonight, is really just present it in terms of the advantages and disadvantages of the undergrounding and talk a little bit about some of the logistical issues. So in terms of the advantages, obviously, there's an aesthetic advantage in taking those pole lines and putting them underground. Additionally, it could eliminate the need for the public utility easements that are in many of the backyards right now. And obviously, the need for the utility companies, PG&E, the telephone company, and the cable companies to come into your backyard periodically and do service and other things. It also would eliminate the possibility of down lines during storms or other events that, obviously there's some safety issues involved when we have lines down, and the service might be more reliable because we won't have as many down lines. Some of the disadvantages that were pointed out in the feasibility report are there are several of the lines that run through the neighborhood, particularly the line that comes from the substation here, crosses and goes parallel to Skyline and then cuts across Earl and down Glenview. Those are major transmission lines, both electrical and telephone, and undergrounding those presents a lot of challenges in terms of the size of the structures and the size of the facilities that have to be put underground. There's the physical disruption that will occur to the residents above and beyond the improvements that we're contemplating in terms of the sewer and the water. These facilities will go in a different trench. They can't be put in the same trench or near the other utilities. They'll need to go in what is called a joint utility trench. And as part of that, and I'll show some photos here in a minute, there's large underground vaults and junction boxes that will need to be constructed. Those boxes have to go somewhere, and they typically cannot go in the street. So they need to go on the private property. There's no room, so those to some extent you'd be trading off pole lines and pole lines behind your houses for these utility boxes and vaults in your front yards. The cost that the consultant estimated to perform this work is about $11.5 million. And just to put that into perspective, the sum total of the infrastructure improvements for the entire neighborhood, the storm drain, sewers, water lines, and repaving work, is probably in the $12 to $14 million range. So this would be an additional, $11 or $12 million on top of that. Another disadvantage is there's a long design time frame and approval process. There's two ways when you underground these projects. There's two ways to do it. You either let PG&E do the design, which is a very lengthy process, or you can do what's called applicant design, and in this case the city would be the applicant. The city would design it, but it still has to go to PG&E and get approved. That's probably about a year process. So going back to the time frame that I was talking about earlier for the neighborhood improvements, if we're looking at starting those improvements later this year, late summer into the fall, we couldn't dovetail these underground improvements into that project. We'd either have to delay those projects and for this work to catch up to it, or we'd have to do a separate construction project in the future for the undergrounding. The last two issues I think are best shown in some of these illustrations. So I mentioned the utility vaults and the transformers that are required in the front yards. This is a new subdivision. It's not a retrofitted subdivision that had overhead utilities in it, but it's very similar. What you would have is the underground utilities would be near the curb line or under the sidewalk, and they would sweep out into these utility vaults. And some of these vaults, you have transformers, you have capacitor banks. I'm not an electrical engineer, but some of these things are very large, 5 foot by 8 foot by 6 foot deep. Some are smaller. You have above ground cabinets as well. So it's not that undergrounding isn't going to have physical impacts as well. It's just a different type of physical impact than the overhead has. And then additionally, at each house, because the pole lines are in the back of each house, primarily throughout the neighborhood, you've got service drops that come from the pole down to your house, and it's typically at the rear of their house. If we move the utilities to the front in the street, we then have to trench through your side yard to the point of connection, the service point on your house. This shows just schematically, if we had the main underground utility trench here within the street or close to the street at the sidewalk, we would need to trench between each house through hardscape, whether it's paver stones that have been recently installed or concrete retaining walls or landscaping. And, so there will be some disruption involved in that as well. In terms of the undergrounding of the utilities, we wanted to present this information. We promised the public we'd present it back to you. And again, this is one of those items that I know the city has received recently a letter from many of the residents here that signed it, but we also welcome additional comment on that as well. So the next is another item that I think is near and dear to a lot of people's heart, and that is traffic through the neighborhood. So immediately upon reopening of the roadways, after paving Glenview and Earl and opening that up to traffic, there was some response that we got back from the community in terms of speeding and other traffic issues in the neighborhood. So the city undertook several different things, several different measures. One was there has been an increased police presence in the neighborhood. I'm sure many of you have seen that. Some of it's been in the evening, some of it's during the daytime. So police have stepped up the enforcement and their visibility there, and it has had, I think, a noticeable effect. The other thing is the police department has installed or set up radar trailers on several different occasions. Those radar trailers, those are the trailers that you see that say speed limit 25, and then as you drive through, they'll flash your speed. Those also, I think, have a pretty significant effect in terms of slowing down traffic when they're there. Unfortunately, they're not there all the time. And unfortunately, the police aren't there all the time, that they can't be. We've also recently done a speed survey. We're still waiting on to gather the data back from that and analyze it, but that'll give us some additional data as well. So what are we doing on an interim basis besides that? We're exploring things like doing some signing and striping improvements. Again, they would be temporary. The other thing that we're looking at is the possibility of installing a portable radar indicator, and that would be mounted most likely to a pole. And so it would be, again, temporary. It wouldn't be a permanent installation, but it would be there more than just when the trailer's there. It could, you know, if we mount it on the pole, it could face northbound for 1, 2, 3 weeks, and we could also turn it around and face it the other direction. Again, I think in terms of discouraging speeding, those have shown to be very effective. But ultimately, we think the long-term solution for the traffic issues within the neighborhood is the integration and installation of these traffic enhancement and traffic or streetscape enhancement and traffic calming measures that I described earlier, the bulb outs and some of these intersection improvements, because those will truly not only help beautify the street and the neighborhood, but they also have a good function in terms of traffic calming. Wanted to touch briefly on the status of the home rebuilding within the neighborhood. As I think everyone's aware, there were 38 homes that were destroyed by the event and another 17 that were damaged. Of those, 13 of the 38 that were destroyed, 13 permits have been issued and the homes are under construction. Several, I think, are very near occupancy. Aaron, correct me, have anyone? No one has moved in yet, but we're very close, yeah. There's an additional 7 that are in the planning permitting stage, and there's 5 additional ones that are in the pre-application stage. So we're roughly about a third of the homes that have been permitted or under construction, about a third are in the planning and permitting stage, and then there's about 13 homes that the status is still undetermined. And of that 38 homes, there's 3 of the lots that are owned by PG&E. Yeah. Actually, I was going to answer that on this slide. Yeah. So of the homes that are owned by PG&E, there's 3 homes that are owned by PG&E and 3 lots that are currently owned by PG&E. The lots are 981 Glenview, 1680 Claremont, and 1641 Claremont. So that would be 981 Glenview, 1680. And 1641. And then there's 3 homes that are currently owned by PG&E. One is at 1720 Earl, which is here. One is at 1120 Fairmont. And the other is at 1636. No, I'm sorry. The other one is at 1641 Claremont. Oh, it is 1636. I apologize. Then the last item, major item that I wanted to inform the residents of tonight, and we're happy to say that as of 5 o'clock today, we are live with our rebuildcrestmore.org website. So that website is, like I said, live. It's provides information related to the infrastructure rebuilding that's occurring that I described. It has a lot of the exhibits that we had here tonight, plus many more. It has information regarding rebuilding of your homes. It will also have construction updates, both on the projects that I described earlier, the Sneath Waterline improvements. It will also include updates of the construction as we go forward with the future phases of construction, as we get into more detail with those projects, and we know when some of the road closures or detours are going to occur, we can post that information there. And it's also a great avenue for the public, the residents, to provide feedback and comments back to the city. There's also a frequently asked questions page that if you go there tonight, unfortunately it'll say under construction, but we're going to have that page up very quickly. Part of our delay on that is we wanted to incorporate some of the comments and questions that came out of this evening's meeting as well. So we encourage you to visit the website, utilize the website, sign up for email updates. I'll talk a little bit about the detail of the website here in a minute, but as far as the email updates, the city does have about 130 or so emails. Probably most of the people in this room, we do have your email. If you're already on the email list, you don't need to re-register. We don't want you to have to re-register, but if you're not, please register. It's a great opportunity to stay informed and of the project and help us do our job as well. So this is the home page of the website, and these you can click on. These are these tabs here. One is about the project, neighborhood reconstruction, home rebuilding, Earl Glenview Park, schedule and timing of the projects, and send us your comments. It's a fairly easy website, hopefully, to navigate through. As you click on each one of these, it drops down this menu. You click on there, and it takes you right to that page, and there's information there. And from any individual page, you can get back to the home page very easily. This is the comment page. Again, it's very straightforward. You can put your name, your email, and type your comment. It has a place for organization. Don't pay any attention to that. Hopefully that will be off the website here shortly. We don't really need to know your organization. So with that, pretty much concludes my presentation for this evening. And we'll open it up for questions and comments. I'll go ahead and address some of the comments that we got in writing here, and then we can pass the microphone around.
I'll go ahead and write who should be answering them.
Yeah. Here's a question that says, since I work, how do I get to and from my home daily while the street is torn up for water, sewer, storm drain, and yes to no eucalyptus trees? That's a very good question, and I apologize for not really addressing that when I was talking about the improvements. As we do these improvements in the neighborhood, it will be a requirement of the contractor to keep access to every residence at all times during the day. Not only access to your house, but also access through the streets for emergency vehicles, for fire, police, ambulances. So contractors are used to doing this. When I say at all times, there might be an hour here or there when they, have a temporary blockage of the street or a temporary blockage of your driveway, but if that's the case, they'll have to maintain access from both sides. So it might not be directly through. So it's something that's fairly common in construction, and contractors are used to that. Next question is regarding erosion control on private property. Will we get assistance with regards to replacing burned and cut down matured trees in our private lots? And I think the answer to that is yes. Yeah. If you do have that situation where you have burned trees, we had an arborist go out. The city, before I came to work on this project, had an arborist go out and look at all the trees, give us recommendations in terms of which trees are probably not going to survive and should be cut down. The arborist went out very recently and updated that, because sometimes those trees may not show the damage immediately. It may take, a year or two for the damage to show up. So we are aware of some additional trees that were damaged in the fire, and we have a program in place to cut those down, remove them. So if you do have any trees that you think fall into that category, by all means, please let us know, and we'll address that. This community yearns for property valuation growth. Undergrounding utilities will help a great deal for property owners who are negatively affected by the September 9th tragedy. The only comment that I'll say on that is our feasibility study that we performed was purely from a logistical and cost standpoint. In terms of property values, we couldn't opine on that. That's something that would have to be done by an appraiser. These questions I'm going to let Connie address. Do we want to maybe pass the microphone around if anyone has questions that they didn't write down?
I have a quick question. So I appreciate you taking comments and getting feedback on the website, but who makes the final decisions? I mean, you get comments from everybody. You might get a lot of conflicting ones, but someone or some group has to make a final decision on what the streets are going to be like. And also, there's probably overlap, I'm assuming, between what we contribute to the explosion and fire and probably proactive things that City of San Bruno might or should do anyway. How do you reconcile that, and how much money is coming from PG&E, and what's the accountability for spending?
Okay. Well, I will defer your second question, I think, to Connie. But in terms of the first question, yes, we know that there's going to be a divergence of opinion amongst the group. What we're trying to do is get a good feel for if there is a preference one way or the other. Ultimately, we as consultants and as staff need to make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will be making the ultimate decision. For example, in terms of the streetscape enhancements, we've done some preliminary engineering and other analysis, and we know that the options or variations of the options that we have out there will work. So if there is an overwhelming preference one way or the other, we want to know that, because maybe we can, if one's slightly a better option than the other one, we can maneuver it that way. Okay, let me hit a couple of these questions. Regarding reducing cut-through traffic, if the reason for cut-through traffic is congestion or surrounding streets, San Bruno Avenue, Sneath, Skyline, then what will the effect of reducing cut-through traffic on those larger streets be, and are there plans to address that? Well, I think that obviously driving here tonight, I saw firsthand Skyline backs up during this time frame, and traffic does cut through the neighborhood. By integrating these improvements, if we do, that will discourage that. That will obviously put more traffic on the surrounding roads. I think the surrounding roads are arterials or larger streets. That's where the traffic should be that goes from destination to destination. Traffic shouldn't really be cutting through neighborhoods. The neighborhood street should be for residents to come and go. So those streets are designed for that. In terms of addressing any additional impacts of that, I don't think that that's something that really needs addressing, because those streets are already designed for that traffic. It's not as if we're looking at a situation like a new development where we're introducing new traffic onto the roadway. This is a matter of managing existing traffic on the roadways.
Yes, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I was just curious about how those bulb outs would affect what we now have is large parking lots with so many cars parked on the street. And, you know, if the neighbors are going to get upset about that. I kind of like the idea of the bulb outs because it also makes the sidewalk safer for people who are walking. And, you know, it's just, I don't know how that's going to affect all the parking.
Yeah, no, again, that's a very good question. The bulb outs will affect the parking. Obviously, and again, I apologize because this isn't the best exhibit for you to see it on, but if we do, these are individual bulb outs that are about 20 feet long, okay, as you go down the roadway. So 20 foot long, that's essentially about one parked car. So the idea behind the bulb outs on this stretch is, yes, we know that it is going to take away some street that is currently used or has a potential for parking. What it is going to allow for, however, is one parking space in front of each home, if we do this. And on this side, which is the west side of Glenview, we don't have, for this stretch, we don't have houses that front that. Those are the houses that back to it. So we can open up additional pockets for parking here that could help offset some of that. In terms of the bulb outs at the intersections, yes, it will impact parking in some of those locations, but you don't really want cars parked close to the intersections anyway. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the answer to your question is it will have an impact on some of the parking on Glenview for sure. Okay, here's a question. What is the safety evaluation of the intersection plans? Again, we've had our consultants come up with these designs. This isn't something that's new that we're experimenting with here in San Bruno. Things like this have been done in many communities all over the country. The engineering design will ultimately have to look at things like sight distance, speeds, and other things. So the safety concerns will be integrated and will be addressed in the design. Next question is related to water safety, i.e. lead, while the water lines are being repaired. I'm not aware that we have a lead issue. Yeah, yeah. The water quality is tested and verified on an ongoing basis, so I don't think that's an issue that we need to be concerned about, because it is, you know, tested. The PG&E owned lots and homes, does the city of San Bruno have the right to force them to rebuild? Oh, I'm sorry, Connie, you were going to address that question, so I will let you do that. Okay, the next question is, didn't we, San Bruno, do sewer improvements 6 to 7 years ago? I know the 1500 and 1600 block of Claremont were affected during construction. Does this project replace these recent upgrades? Let me get to a map here. and Clark, you may need to help me with the older portion. The 1500 and 1600 block of Claremont, I'm not familiar with, but I know that recently, 3 years ago or so, a sewer project was done down Earl, and that project was replaced, or that sewer line was replaced, and that extended over into the canyon to these manholes. I know that previously, a sewer line, some of the sewer line work was done here as well. Actually, I believe that was part of that same project, wasn't it? Yeah. So part of that same project, the sewer line was repaired and replaced up to about where that black ends. So that portion of the sewer, we won't be, there's no need to repair and replace that. It's in good condition. We'll be doing the remainder of the sewer lines, though, in the neighborhood. Can other areas of the neighborhood be considered for traffic calming measures? For example, traffic speeds down Plymouth Way to bypass Sneath Lane during peak periods. Yeah, unfortunately, I shouldn't start out the answer with saying unfortunately. Fortunately, Glenview and Claremont are wide streets, and they're well suited to integrate some of these traffic calming measures that we've discussed in terms of the bulb outs and other things. Traffic calming measures on the narrower streets are a little bit harder to integrate. And, you know, a lot of people will jump to speed bumps, speed humps. Unfortunately, those are not good, effective traffic calming measures. They've got many downsides, and I won't spend a whole lot of time going into that, but, you know, your police department, your fire department, your emergency vehicles do not like those at all. They really slow down their response time, and so that's something that you know, it's a struggle to find what a good, effective traffic calming measure would be on some of those narrower streets. How many parking spaces will be lost with the traffic control? I don't believe we've looked into that level of detail. These are just some conceptual ideas, some examples that we wanted to put out now. We haven't gotten into that level of detail design yet to look at that. The improvements to the canyon. Will improvements be to the entire canyon from Sneath Lane to San Bruno Avenue? I'm trying to see what these other notes are. Yeah, the answer is no. The improvements to the canyon are, there's an exhibit in the hallway I didn't include in my presentation, but it's really, and when we say the improvements to the canyon, I assume we're talking about the replanting. The replanting is just in this area that was damaged and burned out by the fire. The top portion of the canyon here is where the park will get reconstructed. That's the flat area that's there now. I think that's it for my questions, Connie.
One more question.
So let me, first thing I'd like to do is just elaborate on one of the last questions that Harry just answered about traffic calming on, I think the street was Plymouth, one of the narrower streets in the neighborhood. There are a variety of different ways that we look at for traffic calming, the bulb outs and traffic circles and physical narrowing of the roadway is one technique, as Harry has clearly discussed tonight. There are other measures that include striping and signage and speed alerts, those types of things. We can certainly look at the types of specific issues that are occurring in that street and as necessary on other streets and see if there are other ideas that might be utilized in those areas. There were a couple of questions that I wanted to address regarding PG&E owned lots. We have maintained as best we can an ongoing awareness of the PG&E real estate transactions. We are typically not privy to the negotiations or preliminary discussions with any of you or your neighbors who might be considering selling a lot or a home to PG&E. So we generally find out after the transaction has been completed. Harry articulated what we know, or what is currently the case, the 3 lots and 3 homes that are owned by PG&E. And the questions appear to be encouraging sooner rebuild of those lots, and specifically one question: can the city get the PG&E owned lots sold to private individuals so planning and building can get started sooner than later? And the other question on the same topic is PG&E owned lots and homes. Does San Bruno City have the right to force rebuild? So there is an opportunity with at least one of those lots, which is adjacent to the former Pocket Park at the edge of the canyon, to be considered for perhaps an expanded open space or an expanded park area or gathering space of some type within your neighborhood. That is something that was brought to our attention as an interest of the neighborhood early on, and it's been our position to date to be in discussion, and we are in discussion with PG&E about transfer of those lots to the city. Now, I can't guarantee that that will happen or what the timeline of that will be, but it is definitely our interest to make sure that those lots are productively used, whether in the interest of the neighborhood as a community space or rebuilt as quickly as possible. So again, we're in discussion with PG&E about that and hope that that will conclude very soon. That maybe leads to a related question: has a final decision on whether the Bullis lot will be made into a meditation memorial garden. And again, as I'm sure you are even more acutely aware than I am, that is a private property. It remains a private property. It has not been transferred to PG&E, at least that I'm aware of. And again, as I told you, I don't have any advanced knowledge about what negotiations or discussions might be occurring between PG&E and private property owners. That is a topic that's been discussed within the neighborhood on a few occasions. I am aware of that. And it is certainly in the city's interest, again, to facilitate, again, the neighborhood's interest once private property owners have determined what they would like to do with their properties. And that's the current status of that property. The last question that I have here in front of me is: what is the amount of money given to the city by PG&E for restoration of Crestmore 2? Has any of this money been spent, and on what? So the short answer to that question is that yes, PG&E has committed to funding not only the restoration of the neighborhood, but a variety of categories of costs that the city is, and will continue to incur extraordinary expenses beyond those that are normally undertaken by a municipal entity and that were anticipated by us pre the disaster. So a portion of the commitment that's been made by PG&E, and again, that has a broader base than simply or just the rebuilding of the neighborhood. The commitment that we've negotiated and that PG&E agreed to was funding of costs associated with and arising from the incidents of the disaster. The total amount of the commitment as it is currently situated is up to $70 million. And PG&E has funded through a trust a total to date of $12 million. and we have expended to date approximately $2.5 million from the trust for, again, a variety of categories of costs, as I outlined before. Some of those costs have been incurred as part of the initial phases of the rebuild, as Harry discussed earlier this evening. Now, this is kind of a tricky issue in that we don't know, and certainly PG&E doesn't know, how much it's going to cost eventually to deal with everything that that has been incurred and needs to be done in the neighborhood, that the city's costs that are continuing, as I said, to address the variety of issues and needs. And so at this point, that the mechanism of the trust is what is available to fund those costs, and there is a provision for an additional amounts to be funded via the trust up to the total maximum amount of as I indicated. But that's so there is an ongoing mechanism that is in place. Simply stated, the full scope of the items that Harry has discussed with you tonight are expected to be funded via the trust if they are not otherwise covered by city insurance or some other mechanism. The good news about that is that obviously this should not be an expense that is borne generally by the taxpayers of the city of San Bruno, for obvious reasons. Are there other questions right now, either for Harry, myself, or we have our department directors here tonight as well,
Yeah.
if there are other specific questions?
Sure. I have one question. Previously, it was discussed on that empty lot between Glenview and San Bruno Park that they might consider doing something with that. Do you think it's going to be in the scope of redeveloping that big parcel of land behind States Drive in that area?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, San Bruno Avenue and Glenview, right?
On the left? Okay, so who wants that? So if you come from Lenardi's and you go down Glenview, it's the one on the left. Okay. Yeah, so that property is owned by Caltrans, and there are no current plans to change or to do anything associated with this project or otherwise with that lot. Our community development director informs me that it's a tricky issue because the San Andreas Fault runs through that property. Is that correct? Which makes it unbuildable. So at this point, owned by Caltrans and not currently planned for any additional treatment. I'm sorry, I'm looking at you, but the question came from somebody in the back. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, my question was, I recall at one of the earlier meetings, whether it's St. Robert's or Senior Center somewhere, the fire chief and a lot of people expressed a big concern about the overgrowth in the canyon. They were talking about thinning it out, and that's pretty much where I heard that topic stop. I haven't heard any more as to doing anything in that canyon to try to thin it out. Are there butterflies in there that we can't do anything with this, or what's going on there? Because I mean, they had the fire retardant planes specifically there to keep that canyon from lighting off, and nothing's changed. What's the status of the canyon?
The status of the canyon is that, as you can see on the picture, and you can only see a small portion of the canyon, obviously, is that this is a much larger issue than is immediately related to the rebuild of the neighborhood. It is not currently. Well, let me back up. The fire department, in conjunction with our our park staff and with various state agencies does, on an annual basis, review the mitigation needs within the canyon, and has been active in the past several years on a area by area basis in doing work to thin what would probably be classified as the most high hazard areas. In addition to that, we do annually do work in the bottom of the canyon to make sure that the area is passable for emergency apparatus in case there is a need to take further action on some sort of a wildfire. The short answer is that at this point, the Glenview infrastructure, or rather the Crestmore neighborhood infrastructure rebuild, does not envision treatment of the entire canyon beyond that which we ordinarily do in order to address the potential for fire hazard.
Prisoners and chainsaws and clean it out in a week.
That's exactly what we do. And could we clean it out in a week? Absolutely not. There's we were able to do. Is the fire chief here? Yes, I believe it was about a year or two ago that we did a fairly small area behind Crestmore School on the other side of the canyon. And that was a pretty significant, it was a week or 10-day long project, but we do coordinate with, who do we coordinate with? With CAL FIRE, I'm sorry, who are able to coordinate work crews to do the work that, as I've described it. Other questions? Yes?
The gas shutoff valves, are we going to have that part of this? I think we passed the legislation that this was approved. Is that going to be part of all of this change here?
Well, the work that we're talking about tonight is the work that the city is undertaking in order to rebuild the neighborhood. The issue of shutoff valves on the gas transmission lines is a responsibility under the new legislation and a project planning issue under PG&E's work program. PG&E has committed to the installation of shutoff valves, and there's new legislation that requires that. Do you know the specifics of the? Okay. Okay, so I'm told that PG&E's work to install remotely operated shutoff valves in San Bruno has been completed. Do we know the number or location of those valves? Okay, so valves have been installed in 3 different locations in the city of San Bruno as part of the overall program that PG&E is pursuing. There is one at the, pardon me, at the Healy Station over on Crestwood, and, or is that the one up here? Okay, so the one up at near the Crystal Springs Reservoir, one down on Crestwood, and then where would the third one be? Oh, on line 101 down behind 7th, pardon me? Oh, at the Martin, where's the Martin station? That's the Lomita station. Okay, it's at the Lomita station, which is on the southern end of the airport, which is operating on line number 101, which is a different transmission line that is adjacent to our community. Other questions?
I have a question. Are there any time restraints on using these PG&E funds, or any other restraints from PG&E on using them? Yes?
Yes. So,
Okay.
So let me comment. The trust, as it is currently written, has a life extending through 2017. And the restriction in the trust is for, essentially it provides that disbursements for the trust cannot be made in a manner that duplicates other funding sources. So it's, there's no double dipping. 2017 is, it was a guess, and again, this was a negotiated instrument. And at this point, I think it is probably too soon still to tell what the duration of the city's financial exposure to needs related to this incident will be. We have a general understanding with PG&E that the purpose of this trust is to provide the funds to address the city's real needs, and my expectation would be that that ongoing discussion would resolve any issues. If 2017 turns out to be too quick, then I would anticipate that being again a negotiated discussion. I would anticipate a favorable result.
Is there a way that on this new website the residents can see an accounting of when some of that money is spent, or how it's spent and the amount of it, the amounts that are spent?
Sure, we can. Let me just describe a little bit of the process that's involved. It actually is both completely consistent with the city's normal expenditure process, and it is also detailed and well documented. We can certainly, I don't know if this is exactly the right place to do that, but we can certainly find a spot, if not on this website, on the city's website, to give an overview of the expenditures from the trust fund. As I indicated, it's been approximately $2.5 million to date. There was an additional amounts of reimbursement that were necessary and have been received by the city previously that covered the immediate response during the first several days of the incident, which amounted to some, I don't know the amount, but some other amount of millions that was received through a different process. But in any case, yes, we can provide that information. Other questions?
Hi, Connie.
Hi.
Sounds like the city's deciding to lean towards not undergrounding the utilities. I've done a little bit of research on this, and it sounds like you're leaning towards there. But a lot of cities are requiring undergrounding new developments, and this 38 clusters of homes should be considered as such. And it sounds like, too, that there's probably funding from PG&E.
Yeah. I'm going to let Harry respond to the idea of the cluster. But the short answer is no. Well, first of all, no decision has been made. The City Council at their meeting in December specifically directed us to address this issue as we had previously promised to the residents and to gain your input and your feedback. There are a number of issues and benefits associated with the concept, and we're anxious to hear and to understand how the neighborhood views the potential for disruption as well as the opportunity for benefit. So that remains an open discussion item. As it relates to the comparison between a new subdivision and a what we'll call a retrofitted subdivision or area, there is the complexity, as Harry described, if we reached out within the entire neighborhood of the need to disrupt existing landscape or hardscape in the side yards and in the front of properties, which would not be an issue, and it is a little bit more. It's a little bit easier generally to plan and implement a massive project like that at the outset. When you truly have an absolutely blank slate with a new subdivision, compared to the many types of issues that we're dealing with here. But again, no decision has been made. I think what you heard from Harry tonight is that to try and coordinate the two pieces of work, which honestly I thought initially when we first started talking about this might be a win-win type of situation, is really not possible. So there's an extended period of planning, design, and then ultimately implementation that we'll need to consider, and that allows us, frankly, the time to have the discussion with the neighborhood and have you turn over the ideas about the pros and cons and have us jointly figure it out. Do you want to?
No, I think the only thing I would add to what Connie said is you're absolutely correct in terms of new subdivisions. They are typically undergrounded, but like Connie said, you do start with a clean slate, so you have the opportunity to, look at your roadway and determine where your utilities are going to go and fit that joint trench within there. Certainly in this area where the homes, or majority of the homes, have not been rebuilt yet, we wouldn't run into some of those logistical issues that I described. And we can certainly look into the possibility or explore the possibility of partial undergrounding in that area.
Your study didn't look at just doing the area of the 38 homes?
No, the study did not specifically look at just the 38 homes and undergrounding within that area. Other questions?
The underground wiring would not apply to the Earl area. It's just on the other side.
The feasibility study looked into undergrounding all of the overhead utilities within the entire neighborhood. So from Sneath all the way to San Bruno Avenue. So all the overhead lines that affect all 375 homes within the neighborhood. Any other questions or comments?
The only comment I would make is that, the window of opportunity that you talked about, it's getting smaller each day. So even one of the disadvantages of undergrounding, you said, was a year permitting process, but and I know it's easy in hindsight, but if we started a year ago, we'd be past all that. And it just seems as houses are being built, the window's closing, so then, yeah, it will be more difficult than underground, even more difficult than it is today, or it would have been 6 months ago, or 12 months ago.
Any other comments or questions? Well, again, we'd like to thank everyone for coming here tonight. Want to encourage you to please visit the website. Please give us any comments that you think of, in the next day or so, the next week or so, or, any point in the near future. Remind everyone that Saturday from 2 to 4 at the Senior Center, there is this neighborhood gathering, and I will be there. I know other members of staff will be there to answer questions. So, if you think of something between now and then, please utilize that opportunity. So, thank you.
Thank you.